Hello, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be reading 5 hyped fantasy novels and seeing how I feel about them. This idea came to me where they usually do lately, which is in front of my bookshelves. I was looking at my shelves, kind of seeing what books are on my own TBR, and I realized, wow, I have a lot of fantasy books that I have not read yet. If you know anything about me, it is kind of wild because I don't read a lot of fantasy historically. I tend to pick up romance, I tend to pick up contemporaries, I tend to pick up thrillers, and yet somehow I am bogged down with all this goddamn fantasy on my shelves, and I'm just ready. I am ready to get through it. So today I'm going to be reading 5 hyped fantasy novels, books that I picked up on the recommendation of other people or on the hype of other people, and we're gonna see how they go. I'll forewarn you, I have already read all of the books for this video, and I know how I feel about them, and so that might color how I talk about the synopses of these books before we get into the vlog, but let's just get into it. Let me tell you the 5 books that we're gonna be reading for this video. First up, we have All of Us Villains. This is a book that I picked up on the recommendation of my little sister. She is not a big reader historically, but she really enjoyed this book. I think this is one of the books that kind of sparked her interest again in reading, and so I figured I would go ahead and pick it up. That way we would maybe have something to talk about. Have we talked much about this book? Not really, but it was, you know, best of intentions, right? So this story is about a small town. I don't actually know if the small town is set in any real place. Like, I know that the small town is fake, but is it actually set in the UK? Because all of the voice actors for the audiobook had British accents. Anyway, regardless, it's set in a small town. There is this sort of magical competition that happens once every blood moon. 7 different families compete to control the magic of the town, and it's apparently like a fight to the death. Everybody dies except for the one remaining champion, so we're gonna find out how I feel about that one. Next up, we have Middlegame by Shauna McGuire. This is a book that has been begging to be read from my shelves. I feel like every time I look at this book, it's like, hey, you know the people that you really like and admire and watch on YouTube, like they really love this book, right? Like, you know, you probably should read this book, right? That's what it's whispering to me, and I finally got the gumption to pick it up. It took me 3 months to get through, but I did it. I finished it this week and I had lots of thoughts, lots of feelings. This book is about 2 twins who have something to do with alchemy, something to do with godhood. I have finished this book. I still don't really understand what it's about. I'm gonna talk about it today in this video. Next up, another book that felt like it was just high time to read it, The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. I did not like The Night Circus, and yet somehow I was convinced, I was duped into picking this book up. I don't like super lush lyrical fantasies, which is weird to say because one of my favorite series of all time is the Strange the Dreamer trilogy by Laini Taylor, and that is very lush and lyrical for sure, but I just really hated The Night Circus, and I just had a feeling that I was probably gonna hate The Starless Sea too. So why I decided to buy this book, I don't know, but it's a hyped fantasy and I'm reading it for this video. This book is about some guy named Zachary. I'm gonna call him Zach for the purposes of this here synopsis, but this book is a lush, lyrical, like ode to books, I guess you could say. Zach finds a book and he's like, hey, this sounds like a story that I've heard before. It kind of actually sounds like my own life. And so he decides that he is going to try to find out more about the mysterious author of this book and find out more about the origins of the story. So that's what this one's about. Next up, we have The Strange Case of the Alchemist Daughter. This is an interesting one. The next 2 are kind of interesting, I guess you could say. They're not quite as hyped. This one I picked up because while I don't think it is hyped in the fantasy genre as a whole, I know quite a few people that I like, admire, respect, watch their videos, enjoy this book. This is a sort of twist, I guess you could say, on the Jekyll and Hyde story. I think there is a little bit more to the story. I don't know why I'm saying this as if I have not already read this book. There is more to the story than just the typical Jekyll and Hyde thing. You've got multiple characters, you've got a lot of women at the forefront of the story, and it's just a colorful tale. It's a colorful retelling, a colorful spin on things, and I have thoughts and feelings about it. It's unconventional. We're gonna get into it in just a second. The last book that I'm gonna be reading for this video is Circe by Madeline Miller. This is one that I don't think gets a lot of hype actually and a lot of talk, but I think it's a book that you see on a lot of people's bookshelves. You definitely see it a lot at Barnes & Noble. I feel like we see this book. I feel like I don't hear a lot about this book, but since The Song of Achilles is so popular, I feel like it was kind of appropriate to put this book on the list. Circe is obviously a Greek mythological retelling. I don't like Greek mythology very much, so again, why I picked this book up, I have no idea. I spent an ungodly amount on this hardcover. I think I remarked upon it in my original review on Goodreads. I think I purchased the hardcover, immediately said something to the effect of, why the fuck did I spend so much money on this book? And then I just never decided to actually pick it up until today. Well, until this video. Those are the 5 hyped fantasy books I'm going to be reading here in this video. We're going to see if I like any of these. We're going to see where this journey takes us. Before we get started, I'd love to know in the comments down below what you predict my ratings of these books are going to be. I think it'll be fun for you to actually see what my ratings are as the video goes on. And I would love to know at the end of the video if the ratings that you predicted actually were true. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the vlog portion of this video. Let's see if I like these hyped fantasies and if they're they're worth the hype. Hello, this is the first vlog clip I filmed in 2 weeks. I have started a book with a name, a book whose name I cannot remember, a book named All of Us Villains. Okay, I am enjoying this. Are we shocked? Are we surprised? I feel like we all should be because fantasy and I, tenuous relationship at best. This story, however, was recommended to me by my darling little sister. I decided I'd pick it up because I feel like her and I tend to have similar taste in books. She and I tend to have similar taste in books. Not that she reads very many books. I trusted her judgment. I picked it up. It's good. It's a story about a magical tournament wherein 4 people fight to the death. Think of it like a magical Hunger Games. So every generation, there is a champion put forth by each of the magical families in this one place. In the UK, I'm assuming, because the narrators have British accents. We're following 4 of, I think, 8 champions as they embark to go on this magical journey, and whoever's left standing is the one who brings home the magic to their fam, you know, the high magic, if you will. The 4 main characters have already been, in my opinion, introduced in a way that I find interesting. I'm liking the overall vibes and the overall tone of the story. Curious to see if I'm gonna actually enjoy the magical tournament, because if I'm being honest, that's part of the reason I didn't enjoy the Hunger Games. Like, I didn't enjoy the game part. But I read a book similar to this called Payback's a Witch. It had kind of a similar vibe. Each family puts before the champion, there's magical tournament. Whoever wins the tournament has the magical powers for like a generation. Same premise in that regard. This is like teens. Kind of fun, kind of zesty, and in that one I don't think anyone died. In this story, 7 whole people are supposed to die. I think it's 8 champions put forth. I could be completely wrong here, but reading comprehension has never been my greatest strength, so some shit has already kind of gone down for each of our main characters before the tournament has even kicked off. We're about to get to the tournament kicking off at this 30% mark, which I like. I feel like the pacing's been pretty good, but characters all have different things. You've got the guy who's like the underdog. He's got some power now. We have Big Dog, who has a lot of power. Some stuff went down with his family, and he's like, I don't know about all this. We have a girl who was kind of forced into this magical competition by her dad, and we're not really sure why. And then we have this girl who was supposed to be the champion for her family, and unfortunately her sister is champion instead. It's kind of like a Katniss and her sister bullshit kind of thing, you know what I mean? Well, hey, I finished All of Us Are Villains. All of Us is Villains. All of Us are villains. Yeah, I finished this book. I was going to update you as I read, and I didn't. And you know what? I think that's for the best for a lot of reasons, but mostly because now I definitely won't spoil it for you because I don't remember the plot of this book. I do have some good like tasting notes and or like final thoughts though, having finished it. Overall, I did really enjoy this book. I felt like the listening experience was really satisfying, and overall it was just a story that kept me super engaged. If I'm thinking about this story though in terms of was it truly rich and inventive and did the plot really like slap, I'm gonna say no. I rated this like 3 stars on Goodreads. To me, it's like between 3 and 4 stars. It definitely, like I said, was entertaining, but on the other hand, I don't feel like it followed through on the promise that we were given. And I think a big part of that is that this story is a YA book. As intriguing as the premise is, it did not go exactly as far as I wanted it to go. There were like hints of things that I was getting into. I liked having some kind of like romantic relationships developing out of these alliances that were formed, as you know, our characters are in this like deadly competition. And I did enjoy the magic system, and I did enjoy strategizing and the kind of gruesome deeds that had to be done. I just didn't feel like it went far enough. I feel like had this been an adult story, you could have had like characters able to bang it out. You could have had true gruesome murders instead of just having kind of like off-page things happening, like off-page, like, oh, we know that person died, but like we don't actually see how it happened. I don't know, that was really disappointing for me. If you're building up this idea of like this really villainous story and you're not able to execute on it because of the genre that the story is set in, it doesn't 100% work. That sucks because there was so much here that I was excited for, and yet I think the execution wasn't entirely perfect for me. If you have any suggestions or recommendations in the comments down below for a book that's like this but in an adult setting, I would love to know, because that's something I'd be interested in. Honestly, like the more I think about this book, the more that I'm like not upset but just frustrated, because I really wanted this to be something that like was a 5-star read for me, and for like the first 50% I definitely felt that way, but there weren't really any twists there in my opinion, and I feel like the ending you could just see coming from a mile away as well. So I don't want to bitch about this story because I'm not like mad at it. I'm glad that I read it, and I totally understand why my sister and so many other people like this book. It wasn't perfect for me, and that's cool. In terms of whether or not I think this book was overhyped or like is it worth the hype, I do think the story is worth the hype. I have yet to read a YA fantasy like this. I'm sure there's definitely like magic competitions in other books. I have read them in other stories, but I haven't read one like this in a book before. So if the plot sounds at all intriguing to you, I would pick it up. It's a fun book, and I'm glad I read it. Next, I wanted to read, okay, I didn't want to read the Starless Sea, let's be honest. I'm not really excited to read that book in general because it sounds not like something I'm going to enjoy, but I own it, so I need to read it, right? We're actually going to be reading Circe by Madeline Miller. Also not excited about this one, to be honest. The other two, I'm excited about. These two, Starless Sea and Circe, I'm like, I don't know. These are definitely books that I bought into the hype on. I wanted to be someone who was super into Erin Morgenstern's writing. Spoiler alert, I'm really not. I did not like The Night Circus, and I was just kind of like middle of the road about A Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller, so I'm like, oh my god, fuck. No. Okay, so I just logged into Libby, and the wait is over. I can check out the Starless Sea right now. Yay. I am going to read Circe first though, because I only have 2 days left for my loans. We're gonna listen to that. I'll update you as we go. I'm just gonna say it right now, I think this one's gonna be overhyped. I don't think it's gonna be worth the hype, but we'll see as I read. Maybe it'll be good. Maybe I'll have like that unpopular opinion that this one is better than Song of Achilles. I'm like 20% into Circe by Madeline Miller, and I'm not enjoying it just as I thought that I wouldn't. The audiobook listening experience is stunning. Like, I am having a good time listening. It's very passive. It's definitely not an unpleasant experience, but the story itself, oh my god. This is like historical fiction. I am just so fucking bored. I understand that men suck. Like, I don't want to keep reading books about how men suck. I get it. I fucking get it. I really do. I live in the world, right? I don't really need to read that in my fiction. Like, that's just not really the escapism I'm looking for. And in this story, it's like even worse because we have this sort of like naive goddess, I guess you could say, who's treated like shit by her entire family. She helps mortal men, or at least she's helped a mortal man, and he kind of like betrays her. And I can just tell that this is what the book is going to be. It's going to be like issue after issue with her like having small triumphs here and there. The ending's going to be like kind of sad and tragic. Like, I know that that's what it's going to be. I get it that this is like a story that has been told before, and so you can't deviate so much from that. I know that in some of the reviews people say like, oh, it's giving her autonomy and like she's telling her own story, but I don't know that that makes it much better when the outcome's the same, when she's still going to be betrayed by everyone. I don't know, like that doesn't seem very empowering to me. Like, just because you're able to tell your own story doesn't make the outcome of that story any less sad. And in other circumstances, I think that I am more willing to read something like that. Like, if this were nonfiction, okay, valid, but I don't read that in fiction. That's not really like my taste. Not living, laughing, loving, I'll tell you that much right now. It's just like not really my thing. I will continue to listen to this because I remembered how much I paid for this book when I purchased it. It was quite a pretty penny for that hardcover. I think it was like $30 or $40 when I bought it. I remember remarking, wow, this is way too much money to spend on a book. Like, I'm glad that I'm reading it because I own it, but I'm not happy that I'm reading it. I'm gonna go out on a limb right now and say this is probably overhyped. I'm just gonna update you when I'm done. I don't think I'm gonna have any like productive or valid things to say, and since this is told so episodically, I feel like if I really say anything, it is gonna kind of ruin things in terms of the plot. So if you do for some reason want to pick this book up by yourself or for yourself, far be it for me to ruin that experience for you. I'm gonna finish it and I'll be back. So I finished Circe and I didn't enjoy it, and it's been so long since I finished the book that I don't have concrete feelings and thoughts about the end of the story, though I will say this is the last time you're gonna hear that from me because I have to read the next 3 books for this video in fairly rapid succession, so hopefully my thoughts will be coherent, fresh on my mind for the other books. That being said, I don't think it would have mattered either way because I didn't enjoy this book. I didn't find it very good, and I went back and watched my vlog clip for the first part of this book, and I think all of my feelings still are the same. I think if anything, the book got worse. I didn't feel like our heroine got a very convincing or interesting wrap up to her story. Everything just felt sad and uninspired, and maybe there are little nuggets of hope in there that I was just missing, but it just wasn't something that really excited me. I am very excited about the fact that I have finished this book and that I can now promptly unhaul it, but as for the story itself, unexciting, uninteresting, not something I'm very much into. If you're really into Greek mythology retellings, if you're really, really into Madeline Miller's writing, maybe this is a book that you are going to vibe with. I definitely feel like Song of Achilles is a book that is much better. It makes sense that that one is the one that everybody seems to gravitate towards. I feel like I never really hear anything about Circe, and I think that's for a good reason. I have since started a book though that I am tentatively enjoying, and it is The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughter by Theodora Goss. This is a very interesting book, and I think it's interesting that I put it in this video in the first place. I think I talked about it in the intro, but I got recommended this book by Katie Coulson. Not personally, I was just like watching her channel and she likes this book, and apparently a lot of other people like this book too, so I guess it's hyped in that regard. It's not a book that I think is like well talked about everywhere else, but I know a few people that I really respect and admire really enjoyed this book, so it was hyped for me. Now this book is a very interesting one. It definitely isn't similar to any of the other books in this video. Granted, I feel like this is kind of a weird selection of fantasy books anyway, but this story is about our main character, Mary Jekyll. She She is kind of going through a rough spot because her mom has recently passed away and now she is left kind of destitute. And she's also, as she is going through her mother's accounts and learning about her mother's accounts from her mother's attorney, she finds out some stuff that she didn't previously know, which is that her father's business associate, Mr. Hyde, actually had a daughter that Mary's mother was sending money to. She was living in some sort of like orphanage sort of situation and she's getting cash. And Mary's kind of curious about this because Hyde went missing quite a while ago. I think he was accused of some murders and we don't really know where he is or what his whereabouts are, but we also are finding out other things that are going on. Murders are taking place in London, I believe, and then there's also this mystery that is starting to kind of come to the surface of the book, which is who was Hyde and then what was Jekyll hiding. We kind of are getting some hints that there are some scientific anomalies, some weird scientific things going on that Jekyll was definitely a part of. He was in correspondence with another gentleman who was experimenting on his daughter or was saying that you should experiment on your daughter, and it seems like Dr. Jekyll might have also been Mr. Hyde. Oh, are we shocked at this revelation? And that Diana and Mary might be related, and that Diana's sole purpose of creation might have been Jekyll/Hyde to experiment on her. And I think we're going to meet some other girls who have been experimented on. It's a fun story. It's definitely not the kind of thing that I would have picked up had it not been recommended to me, which I think is interesting because I tend to enjoy historical romances, and while this is definitely not a historical romance, I feel like tonally it feels similar in some regards to some historical romances. I'm just saying it doesn't read like a traditional like historical fiction or anything like that. It's definitely a historical fantasy, and to me that feels more akin to historical romance. So like tonally it's interesting to me. I will say subject matter is not something that I'm totally 100% sold on. I'm just not someone who's really into, is it gothic literature? I'm not really like a Frankenstein, Dracula, anything like that kind of gal. So this is not something that, again, like super appeals to me on a base level, but the narration for the audiobook is really good. I am excited to see what happens next. I think really the biggest shortcoming so far for the story for me is that the characters are not very well developed, which feels weird to say because the writing here is supposed to get you to care for the characters. There's notes scribbled in the margins kind of thing. Like I said, I think you're supposed to really find Diana charming and funny, sort of like, you know, rough and tumble because she's been an orphan her whole life. And I think she was forced to work or something like that. And then Mary, I think we're supposed to sympathize with her too because her dad like lied to her and she's destitute, she doesn't have any money. But I don't find their character motivations very strong. Like I don't really understand what's driving them because I don't think they're gonna get money from any of these scenarios. Or is there some sort of like reward for figuring out who's murdering people? Regardless, I don't really understand how figuring out who these like scientific children are is going to help make money anyway. I don't know if any of that made sense, but I don't know how to feel about the story so far, and I'm enjoying it more so I think than the last book, but maybe not as much as All of Us Villains. So I'll be curious to see where this one goes. So far it's feeling a little 3-star-ish for me, which is honestly acceptable for a book that I picked up purely based on my friend's recommendations and not from a sense of, oh, this is a story that's totally gonna work for me. I'll update you as I read. It's probably just gonna be one more update though, because since this is sort of like a mystery storyline, I don't know how much I can share without spoiling anything. So I'm back on a dirty hair day with a completely different hair color. It's been a second since I last updated you. I finished The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughter, and ultimately this book just wasn't for me. I really wanted to like this one, and not because I thought that I was going to enjoy this book so much as I don't like hating all of the books in a particular video. Like it just doesn't make, in my opinion, for fun and exciting content, and you know, I was pushing really hard. I just didn't like this book. It didn't work for me. I should have known. I should not have picked this book up, but I tried. And you know what? I guess in some ways I'm glad that I tried because I own it and I just need to stop giving into the hype. That's what I need to do. I think my main issue with the story ultimately, and I think I kind of touched upon this in my last clip so I won't belabor the point, is that none of the characters here were characters that I felt particularly attached to. I think that was the point of this story. I think you were supposed to try to care for the characters and that they were supposed to be interesting. And I think perhaps, again, if you like some of these literary tie-ins, I guess you could say, or like, oh my god, I love Frankenstein, like I'm so excited to have the daughter of Frankenstein in a book, like maybe you will be excited about this story. I mean, a lot of people obviously are excited about the story, so whatever. But I think for me, I don't feel like the characterization was there, which is interesting to me because I think this was supposed to be like a very character-driven novel or character-centric novel because you do have all of these like commentary between all of these girls talking and like, you know, writing in the margins of the story kind of thing. But I didn't like the characters very much, and I also felt like the plot went nowhere. The conclusion to the story was not very satisfying in any real way, and I also didn't like the characters, so it's like, where am I left with this book? I don't know. And I guess it's a series, so perhaps, like, you know, stuff isn't completely solved, like maybe it's going to be solved in the next books. I still need a satisfying conclusion in a book, regardless. You know what I mean? Like, give me something to work with here. I'm not getting anything. Yeah, this was not for me. Could understand how other people could like this book. It's not inherently a terrible book, I just don't think it was the book for me, and I also think it was a little weak in certain aspects and areas, but I do know this is a book that has an audience. I'm just not that audience. So I think it's time to move on to a different book that surprisingly I think has a sort of similar theme here with the whole alchemy thing. We're gonna move on to Middlegame. Curious to see how I feel about this one. Really hoping that this is a 5-star read. Something's telling me that it's not going to be, but fingers crossed. By some miracle, I'm 50% into Middlegame by Shauna Maguire. I say by some miracle because I'm pretty sure I started this book in January. I definitely started this vlog in January. It is just quite the accomplishment and miracle that I have actually started and gotten into this book. I don't even know where the fuck to begin with the story though. I have no idea how to describe what this book is really about because I'm not sure that I really understand what this book is about. It's about two people, Roger and Dodger. They are twins separated at birth, living on opposite sides of the United States, and they are test subjects basically, but they don't know it. Each of them has their own specialty. Roger is really into kind of the literary side of things, and Dodger is one that is really into math, and they're both geniuses in their own rights. I think the experimentation has something to do with alchemy, something to do with godhood. Whoever created Roger and Dodger or had a hand in creating them wants to unlock the secrets of godhood and like unlock, is it quantum mechanics? I don't fucking know. I don't know science. I don't know how any of this shit works. The beginning of this story, I will say, was very hard to get into and hard to understand, and I think that's the reason I restarted this book a couple of times before finally just like locking in and trying to pay attention. So we have not only kind of the present day between Roger and Dodger, but we also have a flashback at the very beginning of the story when it seems like Dodger is dying, and then we also have the perspective of the scientist who had the hand in creating Roger and Dodger and like his perspective and who he is like descended from and like what his goal and mission is, kind of. I mean, I don't really understand it, but we get his perspective. And then we also have this children's story, I think, that was written by the scientist's mother that's also in the story. I don't understand how it's all going to come together, but knowing Shauna Maguire, I'm sure it will, and I'm sure I'll be just like mind blown. But at this point, I don't understand how all of these disparate pieces are going to come together, and I'm still not entirely sure how Roger and Dodger work, like what their purpose is. I do like their relationship though. I think that's the most compelling part of the story and the reason why I am continuing to read this book and why I am continuing to be interested in it. I don't think if their relationship wasn't strong and interesting that I would be compelled to continue the story, because I don't really care about godhood. That concept never really interested me, neither does alchemy, which is funny that that's like kind of something that's happening in this book and also sort of happened in the last book that I just read. It's interesting that there's kind of a shared link there and that I'm reading them back to back, but I honestly don't know. I don't think I have anything of particular note to say, and I decided I was going to wait until the 50% mark to update because I was like, you know what, I'm going to have so much to say that I'm only going to need to do 2 clips for this book, otherwise this vlog is going to be too long. And it's seeming like that's not the case, because honestly, I don't know how to describe this book. I don't really know how to put into words how I'm feeling about it. I'm enjoying it. I'm curious to see what's going to happen. I'm curious to see what Roger and Dodger's connection is. We don't know if they're related, but we're like pretty sure they're related. I'm curious to just understand, I guess, more about what their purpose is. I don't know. I'm sort of ambivalent, but I'm also like interested enough to continue to read. You know what I mean? Right now I'm not like, oh my god, this is a 5-star read, but I'm also not hating it. So what a weird state of flux that we are in. I'm gonna continue reading this book. If I have anything to say before I'm done with it, I'll update you. If not, I'll be back when I'm finished. Okay, so I finished Middlegame by Shauna Maguire, and despite my sunny disposition, I didn't like this book, and this book is having me question a lot of things right now. Do I like fantasy? Should I rename the title of this video to I read 5 books that fucking suck? Okay, not all of the books have sucked, but I'm struggling. I'm struggling at this moment to see the sunny side, to see the bright side. I'm having a shitty couple of days, I'll be honest with you, which might be coloring my judgment of this book a little bit, but I don't think so. I just think this book was not for me, and I think it was perhaps a little overhyped. I will say, to the credit of the people who highly recommend this book, they have not hyped it as a book that will work for everybody and is just this fantastic piece of literature. Most of the people who enjoy this book say it's a very unique experience, it's a different kind of story, it's kind of weird, and I appreciate that. No one lied to me. I don't feel cheated. I just don't feel like this book was good for me. good, period. Roger and Dodger, like, am I happy about the journey they went on? Sort of. Do I feel like the villains in this book were completely one-dimensional and added nothing to the story? Yes. Do I feel like I understood godhood and alchemy and any of that shit? No. Which is disappointing. I have liked Sean McGuire's books in the past. I fucking loved Into the Drowning Deep. I really enjoyed the first book, Every Heart a Doorway or whatever, in the Wayward Children series. Like, I do think Shannon is a fantastic writer, and I do think Shannon is capable of writing really cool things. I just don't think this book was fleshed out enough to be interesting, and I guess you could say, as a rejoinder, as a reply, hey, I disagree because I feel like there was a lot open to interpretation, and this book was not supposed to give you all the answers. And sure, that's fine, but I wanted some answers. I feel like Into the Drowning Deep didn't give me all of the answers, but it revealed things in such an interesting way that was really thought out, that made sense. I think the main pitfall for this book was that it attempted too many things at once. I think doing the kind of mixed format of having this children's story in it, also having the point of view of the villain, who for some reason, even though they had their own point of view, weren't well fleshed out, and then also having the points of view of Roger and Dodger, just it didn't work. I think what would have been more interesting is if we could have had like two tandem side-by-side things where we had the first alchemist, the lady alchemist who created villain or whatever, I don't fucking remember her name, Asphodel. I wish we would have gotten her point of view for the entirety of the story, and I wish it would have been interesting, maybe her seeing like the faults in her logic, or the faults of her reasoning, the faults of her creation. That would have been interesting, and then having that side-by-side with Roger and Dodger's point of view could have been interesting, but really, like, the culmination of the plot at the end of the story made, I don't want to say zero sense, it just didn't come together in a way that I thought worked well, or was like worth the God knows how many fucking hours I spent listening to. 18 hours. It was not worth the 18 hours that I spent listening to this book, and now I'm losing my goddamn mind trying to puzzle through and reason through why I didn't like this book. And I think I'm just gonna leave it at this. It just didn't work for me, and I didn't enjoy it, and I'm not gonna try to justify it anymore. Not having the best of days. I'm gonna start the Starless Sea and get back to you. Hello, I've tried to film this clip about a million times. I'm not giving my downstairs a fade right now if you hear any weird noises in the background. That's my neighbor edging his lawn midday in May, which just boggles the fucking mind. It's hot as hell outside. He's having a worse day than me, right? Okay. I tried to read this book. I gave it my best try, my best shot, really. And I just couldn't do it. I had a sneaking suspicion this was going to be the book that I DNF'd if I DNF'd any of them, and then it did end up happening. I was going to say I want to like this book. I didn't want to like this book. I didn't really feel any way about this book going into it, except for, hey, historically, I don't like Erin Morgenstern's writing. I doubt this book is going to be for me, and I was very much right in that suspicion. Look at this book, though. It is beautiful. It is so beautiful. I understand why I was duped into buying it. I just am not really into books about books. I think I talked about this in the Things I Hate in Books video that I made a year or two ago. I just don't really like books about books. I feel like as much as I love literature and story, I find something a little bit like weird about the romanticization of literature and academia. Like, it just doesn't really strike my fancy. It doesn't light me up inside. I don't know. I love being a reader, don't get me wrong, but there's just something about it that feels a little bit like classist. Dare I say classist? I don't know. I'm not saying this book had like classist vibes. I'm just saying like that concept, that idea just feels a little bit weird to me. It's just not something that I personally subscribe to. I never really, beyond like middle school, subscribe to that idea of like, I'm bookish and I'm different, you know what I mean? Like, I read books. That's just like part of something that I do, and I don't necessarily like look down on people who aren't bookish, and I don't think it's like this magical club that we're all a part of just because we read. I don't know if that sounds like rude or cynical or whatever. That's just like, I don't know, that's the vibes I get whenever I try to read books about books, where it's like, literature's amazing. Okay, anyway, no. Just, it wasn't for me. I feel like if you're someone who likes that sort of thing, you like to be sucked into a story about a story, maybe you will like this. Also, I don't know, I couldn't get past the idea that his name was Zachary. I'm sorry. We're gonna finish up this video, folks. I know you've been on this ride with me, this journey. It has been a months-long journey. I actually started this video in January of 2022, and it is now May, and I am finally finished with this video. Let's talk a little bit about what I learned here today. I learned that fantasy is a genre that I own a lot of. It is not necessarily a genre that always works for me. I think in picking up some of these books, I learned more about what I don't like in fantasy than what I do like, which, you know, can be helpful in some ways. Also, I think ultimately what makes me just so satisfied, soul satisfied, is after having organized or reorganized my bookshelves. All of this back here is my own TBR. All of this on the side is books I've already read. I'll leave a link in the description to that video if you want to see that organization process. I got to pluck these from my shelves. I get to put these somewhere else. I don't have to look at these anymore. I don't have to physically own them if I don't want to. I can throw them away. I can burn them. I'm not going to do either of those things. I'm going to sell these books to half-price books, but I'm going to eventually get rid of them, and that just feels good to know that I can do that now that I've read them. Yay. And certainly I could just take all of these books off my shelves and do that now, but you know, it's like I invested time and money into searching these books out, and I feel like I owe it to myself to at least attempt to read most of these. So that's what I'm going to be doing this year. Buckle up. I'm buckled. Are you buckled? I am going to be doing another fantasy related video soon-ish. It's going to be another I Read Vibe. It's going to be different, and I actually have a sneaking suspicion that that one is going to be much better than this one, simply because of what those fantasy books are about. I think these ones were kind of doomed to fail because I like a very traditional fantasy. Kings, queens, princesses, that bullshit. So none of these were like really going to totally work for me, but I tried, you know, I tried, and that's what matters, and I'm glad that you were here for this journey with me. If you were surprised by any of my feelings about these books, and if you feel differently, I would love to know in the comments down below. I'm not going to fight you for sure. I'm actually very happy for you if you liked these books, but I pretty much didn't. The only book, comically, that I don't own is the one that I probably would have kept on my shelves if I did own it. All of Us Villains, I actually do recommend that one. Out of all of these books, I think that was my favorite. These ones plus Circe, which I like for some reason can't find, are books I did enjoy and are books that I will be unhauling. So it feels good to be able to get this out of my life and to be done with this video. So thanks so much for watching. Hope this wasn't too much of a downer. I'll be back with more exciting and hopefully upbeat things next week. Love you so much, and until next time.